30 Facts about Ireland Life and Culture. Ireland is the only country in Europe with a smaller population today than it had in 1845. What happened between then and now? The famine, the diaspora, the revival, the boom, the crash, is still visible in the island's language, its food, its streets, and the way people talk to strangers. Here are 30 facts. Let's get started. Fact 30. Ireland's population reached approximately 5.38 million in April 2024, an increase of 98,700 people in a single year, the largest 12-month gain in 16 years. Since 2014, the population has grown by 15.8%, placing Ireland third among all EU member states in population growth rate over that decade, behind only Malta and Luxembourg. The increase is driven more by immigration than by births. Net migration in 2024 reached 79,300 people, the highest positive figure recorded in 10 years. Employment hit 75.3% of the working-age population in the third quarter of 2024, the highest level in 26 years. Ireland is now the third fastest-growing country in the EU, a standing that would have seemed implausible for much of the country's recent history. Fact 29. Irish, or Gaeilge, is listed in the 1937 Constitution as the first official language of Ireland, placed ahead of English. According to the 2022 census, about 1.87 million people, or 40% of the population aged 3 and over, reported they could speak it to some degree. Only 195,000 of those, roughly 10% of Irish speakers, said they spoke it very well. More than half reported they did not speak it well at all. Around 473,000 said they could speak Irish, but never actually did. Gaeilge is compulsory in schools from primary level through the Leaving Certificate, taken at roughly age 17. Despite that, daily non-school use has been falling even in communities where it was once the default tongue. Fact 28. On December 31, 1759, a 34-year-old brewer named Arthur Guinness signed a lease for a disused brewery at St. James's Gate in Dublin. The rent was £45 per year. The duration was 9,000 years. Guinness was already running a successful brewery in Leixlip, County Kildare, but moved to the capital and began brewing a London-style porter that would make his name permanent in Irish culture. By 1838, St. James's Gate was the largest brewery in Ireland. By 1886, it was the largest brewery in the world, producing 1.2 million barrels per year. The 9,000-year lease was eventually bought out as the brewery expanded across its current 50-acre site. But that document, signed in a disused building for £45 a year, is the origin of one of the most recognized brands in the world. Fact 27. The Gaelic Athletic Association was founded on November 1, 1884, in the billiards room of Hayes Commercial and Family Hotel in Thurles, County Tipperary. Its founding purpose was to revive traditional Irish sports and resist the cultural dominance of British games like cricket and rugby. The GAA today has over 2,200 clubs across all 32 counties of Ireland, with an additional 500 or more clubs operating in countries from Argentina to Japan. One principle has never changed. Every player at every level, including the All-Ireland finals at Croke Park in front of more than 82,000 people, plays without payment. The GAA is entirely amateur. The volunteer ethos is built into its founding rules and remains the defining characteristic of the largest sporting organization in Ireland. Fact 26. The word Halloween traces through Irish-Scottish Gaelic to All Hallows' Eve, but the celebration behind it is older, rooted in Samhain, a Celtic festival observed across Ireland and parts of Britain for at least 2,000 years, marking the boundary between harvest season and winter. In the Celtic calendar, November 1 was Samhain. The night before was when the barrier between the world of the living and the dead was believed to dissolve. People lit bonfires, wore costumes to confuse wandering spirits, and left offerings at crossroads. The original carved lanterns associated with the season were cut from turnips and beets, not pumpkins, which didn't exist in Ireland. Irish emigrants arriving in North America found that pumpkins were far easier to hollow out, and the tradition transformed accordingly. The jack-o'-lantern's origin is Irish. Fact 25. Hurling is widely described as the world's fastest field game. Played with a wooden stick called a hurley and a small ball called a sleotar, the game involves striking the ball along the ground or through the air at speeds that can reach 150 kilometers per hour. Teams of 15 players compete on grass pitches for 70 minutes at senior level. References to hurling appear in some of the oldest surviving Irish texts. The legendary warrior Cuchulainn is described playing it as a boy in early Irish mythology. Archaeological evidence places the game in Ireland from at least the Bronze Age, around 1200 BC, making it among the oldest continuously played field sports in the world. The All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship final at Croke Park regularly draws over 80,000 people. Fact 24. Ireland had 8,617 active publican licenses in 2005. By 2024, that number had fallen to 6,498, a decline of nearly a quarter, representing over 2,100 pubs that have closed permanently. An average of 112 pubs stopped trading every year across those 2 decades, a rate that accelerated after the pandemic. Rural counties absorbed most of the damage. Limerick lost more than a third of its pubs. Offaly and Cork were not far behind. Dublin barely registered a change, losing under 2% over the same period. A 2025 analysis warned that up to 1,000 more pubs could close over the coming decade, as rising operating costs and shifting habits continue to transform the landscape of a country where the local public house has long served as the primary social institution in many towns and villages. Fact 23. Irish wheat has always been different. The grain grown in Irish soil is a soft wheat, low in gluten, which does not interact well with yeast. It will not rise the way a standard loaf requires. When bicarbonate of soda became commercially available in Ireland in the 1840s, bakers had a practical alternative. Combine soft wheat flour with buttermilk or soured milk, add baking soda, and the chemical reaction produces enough carbon dioxide to lift the dough. The earliest traced Irish soda bread recipe appeared in the Newry Telegraph in 1836. During the famine years of 1845 to 1852, with yeast scarce and ovens absent from most rural homes, the bread was baked in 3-legged iron pots over open hearths. That 4-ingredient base, flour, buttermilk, baking soda, salt, has remained fundamentally unchanged. Fact 22. A session, pronounced roughly sesh-un, is an informal gathering where traditional Irish musicians play together, usually in a pub, without a formal stage or audience performer divide. Anyone who knows the tunes can join. The core instruments are uilleann pipes, fiddles, tin whistles, flutes, and the bodhrán frame drum. The uilleann pipes, Ireland's distinctly bellows-driven bagpipes, played seated, are inscribed on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The modern session culture developed significantly in the mid-20th century, partly through the Irish diaspora in London and the United States, where emigrants kept the tradition alive in pub gatherings. That practice then circulated back to the island and became embedded in pub culture across the country. Fact 21. The cliffs of Moher rise 214 meters, about 702 feet, above the Atlantic Ocean at their highest point, along 8 kilometers of coastline in County Clare. They sit at the southwestern edge of the Burren, a limestone landscape that covers much of Clare. The cliffs take their name from Moher, an Irish word for a ruined promontory fort that once stood at the Hag's Head end of the cliffs. That fort was demolished in the early 1800s during the Napoleonic Wars to make room for a coastal signal tower. The site hosts major nesting colonies of seabirds, including puffins, razorbills, and guillemots, and is designated a special protection area. Approximately 1.5 million tourists visit each year, making the Cliffs of Moher the most visited natural attraction in Ireland. Fact 20. Ireland has official Gaeltacht regions, designated Irish-speaking communities located primarily along the western seaboard in counties Galway, Mayo, Donegal, and Kerry. About 106,000 people live in these areas. The proportion of Irish speakers within them has been declining, from 69% in 2011 to 66% in 2022. But some specific communities diverge sharply from that trend. Toray, Tory Island, a small island off the coast of Donegal, accessible by ferry, has 83% of its residents speaking Irish daily. The Aran Islands, off Galway Bay, report 74% daily speakers. Seantor na Nillon in County Galway has the highest concentration of people who speak Irish very well, with 88% of resident Irish speakers reporting high fluency. Fact 19. The man whose feast day Ireland celebrates every March 17 was not Irish. St. Patrick was born in Roman Britain, probably in what is now Wales or Scotland, around 390 AD. At around 16, he was kidnapped by Irish raiders, taken across the sea, and enslaved for 6 years, working, he would later write, as a shepherd on a hillside. He eventually escaped, returned to Britain, and then, according to his own confessio, written in Latin, received a vision calling him back to Ireland as a missionary. He returned, and by the time of his death, reportedly on March 17, 461 AD, Christianity had taken hold across significant parts of the island. The Confessio is one of the earliest surviving documents authored by someone who spent substantial time in early medieval Ireland. Fact 18. The harp is Ireland's oldest national symbol, documented as a royal emblem from at least the 13th century, making it the oldest heraldic symbol in continuous use of any European nation. It appears on Irish euro coins, the presidential seal, and every state document. There is a well-known quirk to its history. When the Guinness brewery registered its harp as a trademark in 1862, it predated the Irish Free State's formal adoption of the harp as an official emblem in 1922 by 60 years. When the new state needed to formalize its symbol, it found Guinness owned prior rights to the orientation. The solution reached, the official Irish state harp faces right. The Guinness harp, on every pint glass and product label, faces left. Fact 17. Between 1845 and 1852, a water mold called Phytophthora infestans destroyed Ireland's potato crop in successive seasons. The potato had become the primary food source for roughly 1/3 of the population, particularly the rural poor, who depended on it almost entirely. About 1 million people died from starvation, typhus, and related disease. At least 2.1 million emigrated between 1845 and 1855. Ireland's population, approximately 8.4 million in 1844, fell to 6.6 million by 1851. In some towns, the population dropped by 60% or more. The period was known in Irish as An Gorta Mór, the Great Hunger. Emigration continued at high rates long after the blight subsided, establishing patterns that would persist for generations. Fact 16. Ireland's population today is approximately 5.4 million in the Republic, with around 1.9 million in Northern Ireland, roughly 7 million on the island in total. Estimates of the global Irish diaspora, people worldwide who claim Irish descent, range from 70 to 80 million. That represents somewhere between 10 and 14 people of Irish heritage living outside the island for every one person living on it. About 36 million Americans self-identify as primarily Irish American in census surveys. The scale of that diaspora is almost entirely a consequence of emigration patterns that began with An Gorta Mór and continued through economic hardship and low birth rates across much of the 20th century. By 1890, 2 of every 5 people born in Ireland were already living abroad. Fact 15. As of late 2024, average monthly rent in Dublin was approximately €1,900, among the highest in Europe relative to local wages. A 2024 survey found that 33% of Irish residents were considering moving to another country because of housing costs, a figure exceeded within Europe only by Malta. Among those under 30, 67% cited housing as their primary concern in Ireland. CSO data showed 69,900 people left the country between May 2023 and April 2024, the highest annual emigration figure since 2015. Net migration remained positive overall in that period, meaning more people arrived than left, but the pressure concentrated on young Irish people trying to find somewhere affordable to live in the country they grew up in. Fact 14. In rural Ireland, lone hawthorn trees, called skeach in Irish, have a long association in folklore with the fairies, or good people, and are considered dangerous to cut down or disturb. In 1999, a major road scheme in County Clare was rerouted specifically to leave a lone hawthorn bush standing undisturbed in the middle of a field. The decision followed warnings from local community members and folklore scholar Eddie Lenihan that destroying the tree would bring misfortune to anyone who used the road. The detour was incorporated into the final design at real engineering cost. Lone hawthorns continue to be left untouched by farmers and construction crews across rural Ireland, standing in the middle of fields, at the edges of plots, or beside otherwise cleared land. The stated reason is typically some variation of, "It's not worth it." Fact 13. Despite the global association of Ireland with whiskey and stout, the drink consumed in the greatest daily volumes is strong black tea with milk. Ireland and Turkey compete regularly at the top of per capita tea consumption tables, with many Irish households going through 4 to 6 cups per day. The tea is not a delicate single-origin variety. It's a robust blended tea, brewed dark, designed to stand up to milk. Within that category, there is a tribal national divide. Barry's tea, founded in Cork in 1901, versus Lyon's tea, the Dublin-based rival. Which brand a household uses is treated as a loyalty matter, not a casual preference. People who grew up with Barry's find Lyon's visibly inferior, and vice versa. The rivalry is conducted with a seriousness that surprises visitors who assumed whiskey was the main preoccupation. Fact 12. Ireland has maintained a policy of military neutrality since 1939, when Taoiseach Eamon de Valera declared the country would remain outside World War II, a position that created friction with Britain and the United States. Ireland is not a member of NATO. It joined the United Nations in 1955 and has contributed to UN peacekeeping operations continuously since 1958, making its defense forces among the most experienced in international peacekeeping on a per capita basis globally. Ireland joined the European Economic Community in January 1973 alongside the United Kingdom and Denmark. The relationship between EU membership, evolving European defense frameworks, and the country's long-standing tradition of military neutrality has been a recurring feature of Irish political debate. Fact 11. Across Ireland, a network of schools called Gaeltacht teaches every subject – maths, science, geography, history – entirely in Irish, making the language the medium of the classroom rather than the subject being taught. There are now over 250 of these schools in the Republic, and the movement has been growing consistently for decades, including in urban areas like Dublin and Cork, where Irish is not the surrounding community's everyday language. Many families who choose them cite research linking early full immersion in a second language with broader cognitive flexibility and literacy gains. The Gaeltacht model has expanded in recent years to include secondary schools, Gaeltacht, which carry the same immersion approach through the full secondary cycle. Fact 10. Fleadh Cheoil na hÉireann, the Feast of Music, is organized annually by Comhaltas Ceoltóirí Éireann, the body established in 1951 to promote Irish traditional music, song, language, and dance. The Fleadh rotates between different Irish towns and cities each year, and is regularly described as the world's largest annual celebration of traditional music. The 2024 Fleadh, held in County Wexford, attracted over 650,000 attendees across the week. Competitions span dozens of categories: fiddle, Uilleann pipes, tin whistle, concertina, harp, flute, bodhrán, banjo, and song in both Irish and English. Winners progress through county and provincial rounds before the national event. Placing at the All-Ireland Fleadh is a significant marker of standing within the traditional music community. Fact 9. Fall to Ireland, the National Tourism Development Authority, launched the Wild Atlantic Way in 2014, a defined coastal touring route running 2,500 kilometers along Ireland's western seaboard, from Malin Head in County Donegal to Mizen Head in County Cork. Marketed as the world's longest defined coastal touring route, it passes through 9 counties, more than 2,500 points of interest, and some of the most sparsely populated terrain in Western Europe. The route travels through Connemara, the Aran Islands ferry points, the cliffs of Moher, the Dingle Peninsula, and the Ring of Kerry. Its launch was a deliberate effort to draw tourist traffic away from Dublin and the East Coast toward western regions, where rural economies had relied on agriculture and where tourism investment had been slower to arrive. Fact 8. When Ireland joined the European Economic Community in January 1973, it was one of the poorest countries in Western Europe. The Celtic Tiger boom that accelerated through the 1990s transformed that within a generation. By the early 2000s, Ireland had one of the highest GDP per capita figures in the EU. A low corporate tax rate, a well-educated English-speaking workforce, EU structural funds, and the expansion of the technology sector into Europe drove enormous foreign investment. Then 2008 arrived. Ireland's property market collapsed, its banks failed, and in November 2010, the government accepted an €85 billion bailout package from the EU, the IMF, and bilateral lenders. Ireland formally exited the bailout program in December 2013 and has since returned strong headline economic figures. Fact 7. The pint served from a Guinness tap is commonly called black, but it is not black. Held against direct light, the liquid reveals itself to be a deep, dark ruby red, the color produced by roasting barley at high temperatures during the brewing process. The creamy pale head comes not from carbon dioxide, as in most beers, but from nitrogen gas, which creates a finer, more stable foam. The pour is a deliberate 2-stage process. The glass is filled to roughly 3/4, then left to settle for approximately 100 seconds, during which bubbles in the nitrogen-heavy liquid visibly fall rather than rise, before being topped off. Guinness's own serving guidelines specify the total ideal pour time as 119.5 seconds. Pouring it faster produces a measurably different result. Fact 6. Croke Park in Dublin, GAA headquarters, capacity 82,300, one of the largest stadiums in Europe, was historically closed to non-Gaelic sports under Rule 42 of the GAA's official guide. In November 2005, the GAA voted to temporarily suspend that rule, allowing the Irish rugby and soccer teams to use Croke Park while Lansdowne Road was being redeveloped. On February 24, 2007, Ireland played England in rugby's Six Nations at Croke Park, the first time an English team had played there. The occasion carried specific weight. On November 21, 1920, during the Irish War of Independence, British forces opened fire on a Gaelic football crowd at Croke Park, killing 14 civilians. That event became known as Bloody Sunday. In 2007, the same crowd stood in the same ground while God Save the Queen was played. Fact 5. On April 30, 1994, the Eurovision Song Contest interval act at Dublin's Point Theatre was a 7-minute Irish dance performance. Music composed by Bill Whelan, produced by Moya Doherty, performed by Gene Butler, and Michael Flatley. It was called Riverdance. The performance was watched by an estimated 300 million television viewers across Europe. The applause in the hall ran long enough to become its own event. Within months, producers invested over $1 million to develop Riverdance into a full-stage show. The full production debuted at the same Point Theatre on February 9, 1995. 8 sold-out shows followed at Radio City Music Hall in New York in 1996. As of 2022, Riverdance had played 12,340 performances in 550 venues across 48 countries, seen live by over 28 million people. Fact 4. In Irish pub culture, drinks are bought in rounds. One person buys a drink for everyone in the group, and each person takes their turn doing the same until everyone has bought a round. The system is unwritten but widely understood, and its rules are clear. Accepting drinks without staying for your own round, or quietly leaving before your turn arrives, is noticed. In a group of 6, the night tends to extend accordingly, paced by conversation, by the next person's turn, by the rhythm of the round itself. The social cost of leaving early is reputational rather than formal, but it is remembered. It is a system that organizes time differently than buying your own drink at the bar, and one of the more quietly effective social mechanisms in Irish pub life. Fact 3. In 1954, a man named Seamus Burke, working for the Tayto Company in Dublin, invented cheese and onion-flavored crisps, among the earliest seasoned potato crisps produced anywhere in the world. Tayto became a national institution. The most characteristically Irish use of the product is the crisp sandwich, 2 slices of soft white bread, spread with Irish butter, with a full packet of Tayto crisps crushed between them. This is not considered unusual. It is a standard lunchtime option, prepared in homes, sold in delis, and defended with genuine enthusiasm by people across the country. Tayto's parent company eventually built an actual theme park in County Meath, named after the crisp brand, Tayto Park. The park includes a roller coaster. The crisp sandwich is available on site. Fact 2. Ireland, the Republic alone, has produced 4 Nobel laureates in literature. William Butler Yeats in 1923, George Bernard Shaw in 1925, Samuel Beckett in 1969, and Seamus Heaney in 1995. No country has a higher ratio of Nobel Literature laureates to population. The island's written tradition runs through Jonathan Swift, Oscar Wilde, Bram Stoker, and James Joyce, whose novel Ulysses is set within a single day in Dublin, June 16, 1904. That date is now celebrated annually as Bloomsday, with readers gathering at locations across the city to trace the route of the characters through streets that remain largely recognizable. The full text of Ulysses is written in at least 18 stylistically distinct episodes and takes approximately 33 hours to read aloud. Fact 1. Before the Great Famine of 1845, the island of Ireland had a population of approximately 8.5 million people. Today, nearly 180 years later, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland together have a combined population of approximately 7 million. Ireland is the only country in Europe, and among very few in the world, whose modern population remains meaningfully smaller than it was in the mid-19th century. Every other European nation that experienced significant 19th century population loss through famine, war, or mass emigration eventually recovered past those numbers. Ireland has not. The cumulative weight of Angorta Moor and the emigration patterns it set in motion that continued through the 20th century produced a demographic absence that no economic growth figure, no census milestone, and no net migration statistic has yet filled. These are 30 facts. And we didn't even scratch the surface of this beautiful, complicated, endlessly layered country. If one of these facts genuinely stopped you, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, this is exactly what we do. Culture, but make it matter.